Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. This is our third edition of our six wildcard game preview episodes, and we've had two NFC games, but now it's our first AFC matchup, and it is the 4th-seed Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the 5th-seed Los Angeles Chargers. And with me, I've got two returning guests to the podcast. First of all, our Chargers fan, who I met for the first time actually in Los Angeles at SoFi Stadium, got back with us. He was here for the Chargers season preview. Trevor Lawrence, how are you, mate?
Oh, good, man. Glad that I was able to take you to a game at SoFi Stadium. I know you had a lot of fun there, even though you had to leave a little bit early. Probably worked out for the best because the Dolphins did not play very well that game, did they?
No, and it speaks volumes that the one touchdown I did see was that really weird one where Tyreek Hill sort of picked up a fumble and then ran it to the house. And it's actually coincidental that actually my flight was delayed by 5 hours, so I didn't know this until I got to. I rushed around to leave SoFi. By the way, the worst Uber service I ever had. The most awkward one to get to the stadium to get out of. But yeah, it's ironic that I left, rushed around to get to this airport, and then I could have actually stayed for the rest of the game. And I missed, of course, a really good touchdown from Tyreek Hill in the second half. So yeah, but it was not a good performance for what I watched at the stadium, as well as what I watched on the second half YouTube highlights. But it was good to meet you, though. Good to meet you for the first time in person, and good to have you back on the show.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here.
Great stuff. And then our next guest was on the pod a while ago, so over a year ago. He came on for our review of Jags against Dolphins in London. I got back with us, Lee White, or other known as BritJag. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, for a Jaguar, the seasons don't go this well normally, so I'm in a great mood.
Yeah, of course. Well, for all of us, but you two particularly, your first playoff appearances in years. I mean, it's Chargers' first appearance since 2018 season, and it's a Jags' first appearance, I believe, since the 2017 season when you went all the way to the AFC title game. So, keeping with you, Lee, what's your take been on the season overall? And did you ever expect going into it that you would not only make the playoffs, but also do so as the division winner?
To be honest, the playoffs was a situation that I just didn't think would kind of come into question this year. I was quite hopeful of a better season. That's not difficult given last year under Urban Meyer and that whole situation. That was just an absolute mess. So it wasn't going to be difficult to improve on that. But given the midway point of this season, it didn't look like it was going all that great. But down the stretch, we really come into our own, and Doug has got Trevor playing to a whole other level, something we've not seen in Jacksonville, I don't think ever. So it's a very exciting time in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and of course, last time you made the playoffs, Blake Bortles was your quarterback. And I think it's safe to say that Trevor Lawrence is a massive upgrade on Blake Bortles. So I think you should go into this game with a lot of confidence, I feel. Going back to you, Tyler, on your Chargers, of course, it's your first appearance since 2018. I think you lost to the Patriots in the wildcard round. What's your take been on the season overall and how it's gone, again, considering what was probably, you could say, a slow start to the season?
Slow start to the season was really brought on by a slew of injuries the Chargers had really quickly to begin the season. I mean, you're talking about losing Keenan Allen for half the year. J.C. Jackson never came back well from his injury. We lost Mike Williams for a while, Corey Linsley, Joey Bosa. I mean, every star player that you could possibly point to on this team, including Justin Herbert, was injured for a good part of the year. Justin Herbert played through those injuries. I think we were really looking at like a 13-14 win season this year, and it just didn't materialize at the start. Now that we're getting healthy, we're going into the playoffs almost at full strength. The only player that we're still missing that was supposed to play a pretty significant role was J.C. Jackson. We should potentially be getting Rashawn Slater back next week. He won't be available for the wild card game, but he tore his bicep and still managed to come back potentially in the same season if we end up getting a win in Jacksonville.
Yeah, looking at the injury report right now, I mean, for the Chargers, there was obviously the Mike Williams incident. He's on the injury list for a back injury, did not practice on Wednesday. fully practice. People like Joey Bosa fully practice, Kenneth Murray fully practice. So there's players there as well that are sort of getting Kenneth Murray. So these players are getting back into fitness, and for the Jaguars wise, Trevor Lawrence actually an injury doubt. He's had some sort of a limited practice yesterday, I should say. So his game status is unspecified, but you'd imagine there won't be a lot that would stop him playing in this game. Of course, you both mentioned it there. Poor start to the season, so the Chargers started 5-5, and the Jags did start 2-6. So both teams have really had a good run to the end of the season down the stretch. They've had a really good. I think they both go into this game with a lot of confidence. I think that's why this is probably one of the more exciting games going into this weekend, because Bills Dolphins is probably a one-sided affair. Ravens Bengals, same thing. But this one seems to me like it could be one of the more exciting ones, particularly in the AFC. I think this is probably the more exciting one for neutrals to watch anyway. Looking at the stats as well, when it comes to offense, the Jags are a 10th in passing offense and 14th in rushing offense, and the Chargers are third when it comes to passing offense, but only 30th, which is surprising, in rushing offense. And then defensively, the Jags are 8th when it comes to their pass defense, and the Chargers are 7th, whereas the run defense sees the Jags 12th and the Chargers 28th. Now back to you, Tyler. How do you see this game for your team being won and lost?
I really think it's going to be up to our run defense. Our pass defense has been really strong, and from weeks, I want to say like 12 to 16 or 17, we had the number one defense in the NFL over that period. I think part of it is us getting healthy at the right time. And I really think that where we struggle is in run defense and slowing down Travis Etienne. Last time it was James Robinson who had a big game. James Robinson is no longer on this team. Can the Chargers stop Travis Etienne and a really improved offensive line that Jacksonville has built up over the last year?
Yeah, I think that's really one of the key matchups, is that, I think there's a lot of talk as well about the decision to play starters in the last week for the Chargers. But I think for the Jags, they probably go into the playoffs as one of the more informed teams. They've had such a good end to the season. But I think it is down to, if you can limit Keenan Allen, and if Mike Williams isn't 100%, then that does leave issues for the Chargers to who to throw to. I know Eckler can also do it as a sort of dual threat back, but I think if the Chargers can stop Keenan Allen, if the Jags can stop Keenan Allen, then I think that we could be set for a really good, interesting matchup. Because obviously this is a rare occasion where a coach is probably on the hot seat despite his team in the playoffs. Brandon Staley has had a interesting first 2 years as a coach. He's received some positive and negative reviews about his time so far. But what was your take on, well, firstly, his time as your coach and how the season's gone for him? But also, what was your take, Tyler, on the decision to play the starters in the final week despite the position in the playoffs already being locked up?
I don't think Brandon Staley's on the hot seat at all. I think every analyst wants him to be on the hot seat because they don't like his coaching style, his aggressiveness, just kind of his philosophy, but it works, right? And there's been no talk about him being on the hot seat whatsoever. I mean, you make the playoffs, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You go on a 5-game win streak there at the end of the season to go and get yourself into the playoffs. He's kind of a wild card. He's a cowboy. That's kind of just his philosophy and how he wants to coach this team and just his demeanor, right? The Chargers are all bought in. It doesn't seem like he has any issue with the players. It's not like he's losing the locker room. He's very much got that locker room bought in on his style of football, and everybody's into it. So I'm not calling his job's about as safe as it possibly could be.
Fair enough. I mean, I still do question his decision to play the starters, because whilst it looks like he's got away with it in terms of, Joey Bosa is fully practicing, Mike Williams may well still play on the weekend. So I think,
let's actually talk about that real quick. In terms of playing the starters at the end of the game, granted, I would have liked to see them more on a snap count, but my podcast host, Zach Alfers, came up with a really, really interesting stat. So for teams that go and rest their starters after already locking up a playoff spot, for those guys that rest their starters, they end up losing in the playoffs 30% of the time. Those who go and play their starters, it's closer to like 75 to 80% win. So I think it's important that you keep a team in rhythm, maybe limiting snaps, but continue to make sure that they get in a rhythm that final game of the season, because it really throws off the entire team when a player comes back after having a whole week off. This isn't like a bye week, right? This is just you've built in some sort of philosophy and coaching style and rhythm into your game day decisions. And if you go and you rest your starters, it can actually hurt your team overall.
I do see a point, because I think one example I can think of top of my head is the Ravens. I think it was the 2019 season. They came in as the number one overall seed. They were a lot of people's favourites to go on and make the Super Bowl. And they had a obviously bye week because they were number one overall seed, and they come to the next week, and lo and behold, the Titans beat them, and that was one of the biggest shocks of the season. And I think there is definitely pros and cons to both. I think it could easily go one way where let's say the Giants playing and Barkley gets a big injury, or could have been the Chargers and Justin Herbert could have gone down. But I think the Buccaneers actually may have had the perfect way of doing it. They played the starters for the first, I think it was at least the first quarter and a half, if not, it might have been until halftime. But I think they did it the perfect way, is that you keep that, you avoid that rustiness. The players still get game time, a bit like a preseason game, to be honest. But at the same time, you avoid the injury risk. I know Mike Evans is questionable, but I think that there is definitely pros and cons of both. But I think I like what the Buccaneers did. The fact they did sort of have the best of both worlds. They rested their starters and also played them in the same game. We mentioned coaches, of course, flipping over to the Jaguars. Of course, last season was a complete disaster with Urban Meyer. This season, Doug Pederson's come in and completely changed the franchise. He's completely changed the attitude in the locker room. I think most people can see that's happened. Someone called it the best decision Shad Khan's made in his whole tenure. Would you agree with that, Lee?
Absolutely. Yeah, he's got the whole team bought in. It's just it's a complete 180. The team feels completely different. The team seems a lot happier. We are now hearing small bits come out from certain players that they're making comments about what it was like last year under Urban Meyer, and in that same breath, they're saying that Doug is the man that we needed. And for me personally, I think he's got to be a top contender for Coach of the Year. We've had back-to-back first overall picks, and he's led us to the AFC South Championship and to the playoffs. So he's got to be in the conversation, and he's done an incredible job.
I'm going to have to disagree there on Coach of the Year. I think that whilst it's a good achievement that they made the playoffs, I think they're also a bit fortunate that it is a bad division and the Titans did really capitulate and really I think the Titans were 7-3 at one point, and I think they completely just capitulated on the offense. And I think I think whilst done a great job, I think there are other candidates like Brian Dable, like a Pete Carroll. I think like Kyle Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell, I think they all, for me personally, I know you might guys think differently, but I think those four, for me, are probably more worthy contenders in my eyes than Pederson. Even though he's done a really good job, I just think that maybe a bit fortunate that it is down to a really bad division.
I disagree. I actually totally think Doug Pederson's in the Coach of the Year race. I mean, you take a team that had the worst 2 seasons that you've seen in quite a long time, and he has totally turned that around. He's got Trevor Lawrence throwing for over 4,000 yards. He's helped make personnel decisions with trading away James Robinson, and still managed to get this team back on track. Big reason why a lot of players came to Jacksonville was because Doug Pederson has such a history of developing talent. And he's got his team in the playoffs. He won even if it is a weak division, he won that division when the Titans were heavy favorites. And then he won the most important game of the year, which is a game that got him into the playoffs. So without a doubt, Doug Pederson's got to be in the top 3 candidates of winning that award.
And who would you give that award to if you were on the committee picking the award winner? Who would you pick as your Coach of the Year?
Brian Daboll definitely has to be in consideration. And then also you take a look at what the Bills just went through with Damar Hamlin, the fact that they are sitting at 13-3. he's kind of getting lost because everyone's saying, "Oh, the Bills are just so good. They're so good. They're so good." But as a coach, as a leader of men, I can't think of the Bills head coach right now. What's his name?
Paul McDermott.
Yeah, McDermott. Like he managed to he stopped the game, right? Like him and Zach Taylor walked out on the field together, shook hands, decided that the game did not matter that much. That is a leadership type of. That's what you want to see from your leaders, right? And the head coach is the ultimate leader, and for him to go out there and handle that situation the way that he did, a team that is sitting at 13-3, best record in the NFL. Second best record in the NFL, tied with the Chiefs. Like you're looking at exactly what you want from your number one leader on the team.
Yeah, I think he's done a great job. I think pretty much since he's joined the Bills, I think it was 2017, 2016 or 2018 when he became the head coach of the Bills. And I think he's got them to their first playoff appearance in with 25 years, won their first division title in over 20 years. All the stuff he's done. And I think the one thing he's missing right now is a ring or Super Bowl appearance. And I think that is the next step. But I think that will happen. I do think that, it will happen, whether it's this season or next. I think they are due an appearance. I think the only thing stopping them really, I think, is the Chiefs and whether they can finally remove that hoodoo they've got. They seem to have with the Chiefs at the moment. Lee, over to you. Who would you give as
one more thing on that before we just close that out? So let's also take into account, and the voters should definitely be looking at this. It's Brian Dable who's next in line, who was underneath Sean McDermott. That shouldn't be lost on voters that the runner-up for Coach of the Year, in my opinion, is also coming from his coaching tree. Like that's so important when you're taking that into account.
Yeah, certainly. Look at them, the famous one with Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, and I think there's seemingly now becoming another great coaching tree, the McDermott coaching tree, you could say. So I think both of them are doing great jobs. And yeah, Lee, would you maybe give it to Pederson, or which coach would you say would get your vote?
Obviously, I'm biased, but I think Pederson is right up there. I understand what you say, and it was a weak division, but he also flipped a team that was on a 5-game losing streak and saw out the season with big wins. We beat the Ravens, beat the Cowboys, had to beat the Titans twice to kind of capitalize on that. But as you guys said, Brian Daboll is a very strong contender as well. Obviously, that Giants team has struggled. Daniel Jones going into the season was a massive question mark for a lot. I mean, not extending him, it raised a lot of questions, and we didn't know what direction the Giants would be going in. But they're a very strong team, and that can't be ignored.
They're a strong team, and they don't even have the same level of talent as a lot of the other teams in the playoffs. That in itself should say a lot about Brian Daboll's ability to develop talent, because that is not a playoff roster, and he got them to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think Brian Daboll was a really good candidate. I think Pete Carroll is one. I think he's definitely a strong contender because a team that was written off completely at the start of the year has gotten to the playoffs. I give to Kyle Shanahan because I think to get a third-string quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant from this year, the last pick in the draft, I think to scheme the team the way he's done and get them to not only win the division but also be one of the favourites to win the whole thing, and also the fact that the Rams, of course, were Super Bowl holders, and everyone thought they'd be the team getting through. So I think, and the McCaffrey trade as well. I think to him and the general manager to get that.
Great year for coaches.
Oh, it's been great. I mean, there's so many more we haven't even mentioned. I mean, I would say McDaniel until 5 weeks ago. I think he still got to the playoffs in his first year, but I wouldn't put him anywhere near. But I think there has definitely been a lot of good coaching performances. Andy Reid, of course, losing Tyreek Hill, still getting his team to number 1 overall seed. Nick Sirianni, of course, the Eagles. McCarthy's done well, but I wouldn't say yes. I think there's been a lot of good coaches in the league. But we go ahead to our final segment of the episode, which is going to be our prediction episode. We're going to give, as we do with every game preview, we'll give each fan a chance to predict who they think will win the game in question. So back to you, Lee. What's your prediction for this game?
I am going to go for a Jags win. I think it's going to be very tight. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, with being one of the kind of the hottest matchups in this round, I think seeing Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Herbert, I mean, you've got two quarterbacks there. I think they're going to be top players in the league for the foreseeable future. And we get to see them go head to head again for the second time this season. Obviously, the first time Justin was beat up and he wasn't able to kind of give it his 100%. So I'm really excited to see that. I'm really hoping that our run game can be strong. ETN is due a big game. He has had a quiet few weeks, really. Well, he's numbers wise, he's been okay, but the game hasn't really gone through him. So I feel like he's due a big one, and I feel like he could be the player that could just edge it for us. So I'll go for Jags 24, Chargers 21.
Okay. And over to you, Tyler, for your prediction for this game.
I think that the Chargers roster overall is better. I think that the coaching really goes in the favor of Doug Pederson. And it really just depends on whether or not the Chargers can beat the Jaguars based off their talent alone, and hoping that the coaching decisions doesn't keep it as tight as it's probably going to be. But I think overall the Chargers just have so many superstars and they're all healthy again. Even with Mike Williams had back spasms. That shouldn't keep him out too long. I think it could be kind of a high-scoring game, just because I think playoff games always seem to go that way. So I'm going to go with like a 38-28 Chargers. I really think that the Chargers have the ability to put up a lot of points. And I don't think that the Jaguars are going to lay down. It'll be interesting to see how the defensive side of this game goes. There's a lot of turnovers, fumble, return for a touchdown, pick six, something of that nature. But I feel like this could be a high-scoring affair.
Yeah, I think that'll be some game. If it was 38-28, I think that would be. I think it would be hard to find a game that's better than that this weekend if it is that score. For myself, I had for the first few days of the week, I had the Jaguars winning this game because I wasn't sure on the status of Joey Bosa, on Mike Williams, but it seems like at the moment, well, Joey Bosa is going to be playing and Mike Williams may well play this game. So I've actually flipped from the Jags to the Chargers, and I'm going to give it as, what score should I do? I'll do 27-20 to the Chargers. I think it'll be I'm not going to say it's a walk-off touchdown because that's just tempting fate. I don't want to jinx what could be a great end to the game, but I think it will be a late touchdown to win it maybe, or maybe they'll get a 2-touchdown lead, the Chargers. Maybe the Jags get one back in garbage time. But yeah, I do think it will be an exciting game. I think this will be, I think, the game of the week in terms of the most exciting climax to a game. And yeah, I think the Chargers are going to win. So that is the end of this Chargers against Jaguars preview. So thank you, Lee, and thank you, Tyler, for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Always a pleasure coming on. Kind of just want to put my final thoughts on this. I think that the Chargers have the opportunity to really pressure the secondary of the Jaguars. Tyson Campbell's a really good cornerback, but outside of that, Darius Williams, kind of a player who's always played his best under Sean McVay. Monteric Brown, Chris Claybrooks. I think that the Chargers wide receivers just are going to overpower them, and that's kind of why I gave them that 38 points.
Hey, yeah, no, I
know Rayshon Jenkins very well. Rayshon Jenkins takes terrible angles to the ball carrier. Andre Cisco, still a very young player. I kind of think that's what is going to propel us quite a bit is the secondary.
What are your thoughts on that, Lee? Do you agree with that fact your secondary could get exposed, or do you have faith in your boys?
Our secondary has been very Jekyll and Hyde this season. It's kind of one of two things. Like the likes of Cisco, he's come strong at the end of the season. He seems to have really started finding his feet. Tyson Campbell really has improved the season. Early part of last year under Urban Meyer, he really, really struggled. Obviously, you don't want to throw the bust word around, but he genuinely looked like that at times. He looked like he couldn't handle it, but he's now become one of the top cornerbacks in the league. Has had a great end of the season. We have had a shift around in our secondary. Darius Williams now moved to the outside. He was playing nickel for the most part of the season, and we were getting exposed a lot. So I think it all depends which defense shows up for us. The Titans game, they were fantastic. So I'm really hoping we can carry on over, but it's cost us. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have concerns about the Chargers receiver core, because
freely. So in terms of that secondary, right, like it is Jekyll and Hyde. I really like that you said that, right? Because it really is. Like I think Tyson Campbell is probably one of the best corners in the draft last year, right? And really, what's the strength of your defense is your guys' front, right? Fatukasi, Devon Hamilton, Roy Robertson, right? Has Devin Lloyd, has Chad Muma jumped Devin Lloyd on the depth chart? Because that's kind of what ESPN is showing. I haven't really watched a whole lot of film. Has that happened?
I would say so. Devin Lloyd came out the gates really, really quickly. First couple of weeks, he was being talked about an awful lot, being talked as a defensive rookie of the year candidate. And he, about midway through the season, he just seemed to hit a wall and just really struggled to kind of maintain the progress he'd made. And Chad Muma stepped in, and I wouldn't say he's not as talented as Devin Lloyd, but he's more consistent. He's a safe bet, and sometimes you just need that. You need that rather than, as I mentioned, like the Jekyll and Hyde side of things.
Because Devin Lloyd had probably his best game of the year against the Chargers last year. I think he had like 3 pass deflections and an interception, and he had like a sack, and he ended up finishing the game with 5, 6, 7 tackles, something like that. He was all over the place that game, and I was like, wow. Because Devin Lloyd is my favorite linebacker in this class, and Chad Muma was the 3rd round, maybe a 4th round draft pick for you guys out of Wyoming. So it's kind of interesting to see one rookie jump another rookie on the depth chart when you look at their draft positions.
Yeah, and that's certainly, I think that's a fascinating insight, because I don't watch your teams week in, week out. Obviously, it's for me, it's mainly Dolphins and red zone double screen sort of thing. So it's really interesting to hear you guys, people who watch your teams week in, week out. It's really cool to see an insight into what goes on exactly play by play. But yeah, thank you both for coming on. It's been a great podcast. So thank you both for coming on. Anything exciting in the pipeline for either of you the next few weeks?
I got a lot of things in my pipeline. So I am a season ticket holder. There is a possibility that the Chargers do get to host a playoff game sometime this season. It would require either the Ravens or the Dolphins winning to get there. So that is an opportunity. We got some things going on with our Say It Again network that I'll get to share with you shortly. We're looking into that. And yeah, the season is still ahead of us. It's not over. One of us is going to be walking away next week happy. The other one, well, we'll see about that.
Well, more likely 2 of us, 2 of the 3 of us as well. I think we will be doing our Dolphins Bills preview later on in the week, but I personally, I think it's probably a 5% chance of there being 2 of us in this podcast today happy next week, but we can hope.
Well, Tua's not going to be playing, right?
No, it's Skylar Thompson. So unless he goes full Nick Foles and just completely shocks everyone, I think that we will be.
Purdy did it.
Yeah, Brock Purdy, he's been a great choice, but I think from what I've seen from Skylar Thompson, it's not great. And if any of you saw him against the Jets, it was
what's going on with Teddy?
Broken finger. I think it's something. I think it's a broken wrist or broken finger. But yeah, it's one of the worst performances I've seen from a quarterback who's won a game. I think there's not many people I've seen have a worse performance and come out on the winning side. He was. I saw a great meme. It's like the kid who gets an A without doing the homework or something. It's It was not a great performance, but you never know. You never know. Bills could have an off day. Josh Allen could get struck by lightning the night before the game. So yeah, there's hope. It could happen. It could happen. You never know. And how about you, Lee? Anything exciting for yourself the next few weeks?
No, just like I said, obviously at this moment in time, still hoping for a bit of a playoff adventure. But to be perfectly honest with you, regardless of the result this week, it's been such an overwhelmingly positive season the Jags. And it's just and that's it, and that's not something we felt like we had for a long time. It felt like that was happening when we drafted Trevor originally, and then last season started to raise a lot of questions, not just about him, but just the franchise as a whole. And we thought we had turned the corner, and it was all falling apart again. So regardless of the result this week, it's nice not to be talking about the draft at this point, because normally we're doing that by the beginning of December. So just looking forward to that, and in the off season continue to build.
Fantastic.
How many top 5 draft picks have you had being a Jacksonville fan over the last 10 years?
I think it was only one season I think we weren't in the top 10, and that was 2017 when we to the AFC Championship game, as from memory. So it's
Jalen Ramsey, Trevor Lawrence. You've got Trayvon Walker. You're an edge rusher.
Trayvon,
and then Lavion Chasen was a top 5 pick. Yeah, man, it's all over the place.
Yeah, and there's so many that aren't even with us anymore. Like CJ Henderson, we traded him away, and
he was a 9th overall pick.
9th overall. Leonard Fournette. It's just been a revolving door.
Top 4 pick. He was a 4th overall pick. Yeah, it's just all over the place.
And so few of we haven't been able to build a roster, and it's finally feels like we are actually starting to build something. So it's been such a refreshing season under Doug, and just to know we've got some stability and working our way up.
Yeah, you can catch this game on at 8:15 Eastern or 1:15 AM if you're a UK listener. NBC for Americans, Sky Sports for Brits. This has been the Across the Pod podcast. I've been Andy. This has been Tyler. This has been Lee. And we will see you guys for our next game preview.
Don't forget to listen to the Shock Therapy podcast. Find it on everywhere. I'm the host of that. And we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.